Hey guys, how's it going? Boy, MQS here, back here with part 2 of my video, which is, I suppose, about encouraging investors to invest in Celtic, investors, sponsors, and whatnot. As I mentioned in part 1, I would love for Celtic to get as much money as possible, as much funding as possible, whether that's in any legal way. So any legal way they can get investment, sponsorship, or whatever, and hopefully towards a mutual success due to my patterns like success Sundays. Celtic played today, unfortunately a very bad result. Had a good chance to go ahead after Rangers messed up yesterday and lost 2-1, and I suppose we were mocking them and they mocked us, as they do afterwards, our nearest and dearest rivals, as I sarcastically say. So this was a great chance to go ahead, but we had a player sent off, had a penalty saved or missed or whatever. I didn't get to watch the game, so I just listened to it and saw some of the information on Google. But unfortunately, I'd say lost the game, got a player sent off, had a penalty saved or missed or whatever, and conceded one penalty ourselves. Adam Ida has been quite good at scoring penalties, and Joe Hart, I think, doesn't have a too bad a record, I don't think, at saving penalties. But I guess it was meant to be one of those days, I guess. So after winning 7-1 in the week, it wasn't so great a result, and I think I wouldn't say it was all for nothing, because each 3 points will count, and I suppose it's good for a neutral, because both old firm teams or Scottish teams lost, so I suppose that's good for Scottish football, perhaps, because it makes it more interesting. I don't know when the last time that happened was. It's happened once or twice where they've drawn. We drew a game and then they drew again afterwards. They drew a game afterwards, sorry. But yeah, for both teams to lose is very, very rare. So yeah, not the best weekend. It was a really good one yesterday, but unfortunately it was ruined a bit because, as I said, we had a player sent off and then, worst of all, lost the game. If we could have hung on somehow, it would have been cool. But I didn't really see the game, so I can't say whether the decisions were fair or whatever. I suppose a neutral will probably have to decide upon that. But yeah, so I'm hoping it was. I was thinking, I'm hoping this season will be like, looking back, we'll look at it as the first season when Ange was in charge. Ange Postecoglou, of course. But anyway, on to the list of my ideas. I'll say this is part 2, so I'm going to cover ideas number 11 to 20. So here goes. So number 11. I know a lot of Celtic fans will disagree with this. Again, I probably mentioned this in part 1, but where I would love for Arabians, Africans and Asians generally, people from Latin America, Ireland, which the club has an Irish connection, and people from all around the world, businesses, banks, sovereign wealth funds, hedge funds, private equity funds, venture capitalists, VCs for short, and even my own fellow special needs people, because we can showcase what we can achieve and what we can do by investing in Celtic and supporting Celtic and donating to Celtic perhaps and that kind of thing. And that sort of thing. I would love for all of them to invest in the club. Again, I know some of my fellow Celts would disagree. I hope that the club, on that note, changes some of the things like distances itself from any violence. Again, I know I mentioned this in part 1, but distances themselves from any violence, including hooliganism, or any sort of law breaking, any links with the IRA or anything like that. I hope that, and that kind of thing. I hope the club distances themselves from such, and maybe even as a club could say, instead of supporting violence, the IRA or any sort of hooliganism or violence, that the club could go against it, including hopefully the fans, which would mean that the club will hopefully benefit through increased PR, a better reputation, and things like that. So I hope the club will look at what it could change to attract more investment, what it could learn to improve. And I suppose improvement always requires change to improve things. If you do the same things, you get the same results, I guess. I'm not saying Celtic's results are always bad, but I hope they'll look at ways to improve, which means some things will have to be changed in some way, I'm sure, to look at how to attract investment. And once again, I know I mentioned in part 1, but I would love for the club to look into having possible actual physical meetups, and also Zoom meetups, virtual meetups, and things like that. So talking to investors, seeing what they could change, and things like that, how the club can improve its image even more, and that kind of thing. Number 12, once we get some investors, hopefully, once the club gets some investors, hopefully others will be encouraged to invest. And maybe I'm being naive, as I often say, but I wonder if those banks, businesses, sovereign wealth funds, hedge funds, private equity funds, venture capitalists and whatnot, if they invest in the club, maybe that could encourage others to invest, and it would increase the share price. So maybe there's a sort of new and innovative way where the club can have so many different shareholders, equity holders and whatnot, rather than just a few. I mean, it kind of already does have a few shareholders, but as many as possible. I would love to see that. And with Italian teams and Celtic, I would love for them to have investors to invest, and encourage, instead of investing like the weapons trade, wars and things like that, they would invest in Italian teams and Celtic if it was up to me, and maybe work with FIFA, the governing body of football, and even UEFA to talk about like improving the image of football, the beautiful game, and talking about making peace, playing football instead of war, instead of violence, and how football can bring people together, hopefully make peace and discourage people from investing in the arms trade, wars, and things like that. So I often say it reminds me of the biblical teaching, even though I'm not that religious. Again, I often say that one. But swords into plowshares and that kind of thing. Number 13, lost my train of thought again. That was something I was going to say, but as I often do, I lost my train of thought. But sometimes I do have my doubts and I have my worries for this season. If Rangers do win the league, heaven forbid, especially if they win a treble this season, which they might, or especially if they win in Europe, heaven forbid, which would be a real nightmare if they won a treble or even a quadruple. I don't know how I'd live that down. But just as we almost caught them up, some Celts, some Celtic fans, in other words, say that the fear is that they'll go on to dominate for a long time because they'll have that money to invest. And if their board is not tight, like ours, tight with money and whatnot, they might go and invest on some really good players in boosting up their team in all sorts of positions, and that's a real worry, the nightmare version. I was thinking I'd love for Catholic organisations, even though I'm not Catholic myself. Again, I know I said this a while back in the past, I'm very repetitive, but I would love for Catholic organisations to invest in and sponsor and support Celtic in spite of Rangers, because the Rangers often slag off Catholics, so it'd be a good way to sort of get back at them. So even like the Vatican and Catholic organisations and churches and all that, donating to Celtic to help Celtic to win things, to sort of get their own back at sort of Rangers for the anti-Catholic songs they sing, even though, as I say, I'm not a Catholic myself, but as it would benefit Celtic, and they go against the hate of Rangers and a lot of bigotry that happens at Rangers. I think that would be pretty cool. It's kind of plaguing my head. I can't really remember what I was going to say for point number 13, but one of the things I was going to say, I'm sure there was another thing I was going to say, it might have been what included in point number 11, but a while back at the club there was like an abuse scandal, which I mentioned a long time ago, and I think that could be really detrimental to the club's image. So I hope the club will come out against such things and talk about how the club can learn in the future and distance themselves from any law breaking or anything like that. I'm sure there was something else I was going to say for point number 13, but I've forgotten, so I'm going to move on. Number 14, once again, as I say, just to elaborate more on what I said in point number 13, I hope that the club will come out and sort of condemn any law breaking, again, any hooliganism, any links with the IRA, and things like that. And again, instead of, maybe there could be a sort of way to make peace, as I say, with football, as I mentioned before, in a way, kind of where, again, I could be being naive, but maybe they say, instead of fundraising for the IRA, they fundraise for Celtic, and it goes into football instead of violence, and young people could be encouraged into football, which will give them something to do. I have to mention this, so local politicians and councillors and whatnot, which I hope to come to, and even the lottery funding and whatnot, could be used to help Celtic, and in return, Celtic to help, as a club, to help young people to have confidence, to avoid trouble, and that kind of thing. Keep their noses clean, as they say. As the saying goes, you keep themselves out of trouble. For those overseas who might not know that saying. Number 15, as I say, I'd love to find out ways, and I hope the club will find out ways to attract investment and sponsorship and whatnot, and look at all the possible legal ways, all sorts of ways that they could bring in that investment and sponsorship, in spite of being in, let's be honest, a not so good. I was going to say a rubbish league, but you could say it is kind of. But it does have a lot of passion and positive things about it. So maybe there's something they could do to market at least Celtic around the world, like how popular Celtic is. So even though it's a very big fish in a tiny pond, which keeps it back a little bit, because like EPL teams and even Serie A teams, Bundesliga teams, La Liga teams and whatnot can get more money because of the league they're in. But I hope Celtic finds some sort of way. I suppose they do sort of friendlies in Asia. Maybe they should do more in China and India and more populous parts of Asia as well, not just Japan or Korea, but all over Asia, if it's safe to do so, so they can expand the brand. Number 16, on the subject of finding all possible ways to bring in investment and sponsorship, I would love for people to share ideas. So I hope people will get involved in the comments and maybe even make your own versions of this video more coherently than myself, because I know I have speech difficulties sometimes when I stumble on my words and forget what I'm going to say and things like that. But people who can communicate better than me, which is not saying much to be fair, but anyone who can sort of put that idea across could look at ways, or anyone who has different ideas than me could look at ways, or people who are experienced, like so Celtic fans who might be experienced in business or marketing or whatever, could look at ways, any sort of way to bring in investment into the club, and maybe even like places where they work. It could be in the tech industry or wherever else people work. They could look at ways to benefit the club, and maybe even if they run a business, even a small business, an SME or whatever, as well, or anything like that, they could invest. I don't know, or I hope Celtic fans will look at all possible creative ways to fundraise for the club, so benefit the club in all possible ways, like in terms of being used to buy better players and things like that. So I hope people will share their ideas. Number 17. Again, another idea where I could be being naive potentially, as usual perhaps, but I thought I'd share it anyway, as per usual, as I normally do. Is what if Celtic had a special bank account where fans knew any money that goes into this bank account would be earmarked to be invested properly in buying better players, developing the youth academies, marketing, branding, and supporting the foundation, and anything that will benefit the club both on and off the pitch, including in its PR, including in its image around the world, basically, and that kind of thing. Number 18, I think it'd be cool if the club and its fans talked about all the positive things about Celtic, including like why fans love the club, what they love about the club, and the good work it does through the foundation, and hopefully that will benefit the club through FIFA and UEFA as well. It'd be great if the club could work with FIFA and UEFA, and other bodies, NGOs and whatnot, could help again with getting young Glaswegians, especially into football, as it's quite a deprived area in the UK. It's one of the more deprived areas of the UK, so that could be an argument that the club could use to get more funding to build more pitches, 7-a-side pitches and things like that, to get more young people, 5, 6 and especially 7-a-side pitches, which can get more young people into playing football, and hopefully that can develop their character and improve their lives just generally. And I mentioned about how I know the SPL is known to be a bit of a rubbish league, especially compared to the EPL. But maybe Celtic could look at ways to discuss with the SFA, the Scottish Football Association and whatnot, and the SPL itself as well, and maybe work together and talk about how they can market it better, maybe what they could learn from the EPL and whatnot. So I think that could be another way that the club could benefit. Number 19, through increased investment, I hope that the club will do projects like helping, let's say, Indigenous Africans and Australasians in software development, and number 20, also in STEM. And in turn, hopefully, Indigenous Africans and Australasians, as they hopefully become more empowered, will benefit the club in return, and look at ways they could benefit the club. So anyway, I know this went on a bit longer than planned as usual, but I hope you weren't too harsh, but I'd love to know what you think. Peace out.